everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are doing a minimal supplies, I think a very elegant birthday card. This is actually a birthday card for my mother. Her birthday is in February, and I decided I would make this card for her. So what I have here is a die set that is very, very simple. It's a layering die set, but it's very simple. Only has 3 pieces that layer on top of that main flower, and it has some beautiful etching detail. I'm also using a nesting rectangle die. I believe this one is from Simon, but any rectangle or basic shape die you have will work. I have an A2 cream card base here. This is from Pinkfresh Studio. I have a panel of white cardstock, and that is from, I think that's HAMMERMILL cardstock that I just cut to be slightly smaller than the A2 card base. And then I have a foiled background that I made eons ago and have just been waiting to have a use for it. This video was actually inspired by Jennifer McGuire. She was actually using pattern paper, but I wanted to add some elegance and some class to this particular card, and so I chose to use a foiled background that had been sitting in my used pile for quite some time. This is going to have to go through the mail, so I'm trying to minimize some of my dimension. So a lot of my dimension is going to come from the flowers and the sentiment. So the white panel and the gold foil panel are going to be adhered flat to the card base. The foil I used was Spellbinders gold foil, and I can't remember what foil plate I used, but I used the Pinkfresh Studio solid foil plate to create that kind of geometric background. It foiled really, really well, but it's been in my stash for a very long time, and so there are some like scuffs on the foil itself, but I don't think that it's bad enough that it looks bad. I think it adds some kind of interest to the background. So here I'm going to fiddle and try to figure out how to layer this flower. It took me just a minute, but once I figured it out, it really made a lot of sense. So once I figured it out, like I said, it was very, very simple. So you take that larger piece that's kind of in the shape of a V that goes down toward the base of the flower. Then you have that kind of one that looks is a little bit smaller than the V-shaped one that goes on top of that. And then this very kind of narrow piece spans across that second smallest piece. And it adds really a lot of interest. I chose to keep this very tone on tone and cut everything out of white. That is what Jennifer McGuire did in her video, and I thought it was just very, very elegant and classy. And the fact that this die has some etching detail, some embossing detail in it, I think really adds enough interest without it being distracting. So I have 2 flowers here, and the first flower I just glued 1 layer on to each, I guess, layering section. But for the second flower, this one's going to go on top of the first one. And so I'm going to add just 1 layer of that large V shape. The next 2, I'm going to add 2 layers so that this flower has a little more interest, sits up off the card just a little bit more, and sets it apart from the flower that only has 1 layer. You could absolutely like skip all of these layers. This die set actually looks like a flower without the layers on there, and that would be another look that you could try. Of course, you could cut this out of colored cardstock. You could make your own colored cardstock. You could cut it out of pattern paper, what have you, out of some sort of ink blended panel that you made perhaps. I just chose to use white. I thought that would be very elegant and classy, and white cardstock is typically cheaper, less expensive, and I had a bunch of scraps, and this was a good way to use some scraps up. So I'm going to finish layering this up. This is the last of the thin little section. It's kind of like where the petal folds over and is facing you. I'm going to kind of wiggle this in place. I use some liquid glue. You could absolutely like use a sticker maker or double-sided adhesive to adhere these together and make them into like a sticker. But I really wanted that wiggle room, and plus this is the first time I've used this die, and I wasn't entirely sure how it went together, so I wanted to make sure I had some wiggle room. Here I'm just showing you the difference in dimension. with just one layer on each of them versus two. Here I'm trying to figure out kind of my layout. I wanted to make sure that I was originally just going to do one flower, but I felt like it needed a little bit more just to kind of provide some balance. So I'm happy with this layout. I'm going to go ahead and glue these flowers down flat. The dimension does come into place with the layers that we've added on there, but I'm just going to adhere these down flat and then trim off any of the excess that's hanging over. Here I'm just using some scissors to trim off that excess that's hanging over the edges. For a sentiment, I'm going to be using this stamp set from Honeybee. This is small card, big hugs, small card, something like that. I'll link it below. But it has a stamp and coordinating die. I'm going to be using this Stardust ink. This is a good close match to a gold color without having to break out with an embossing powder or a pigment ink. I didn't want to add more shine. I felt like this was plenty shiny and I didn't want to make the card look busy. In addition, I was kind of under a time crunch and didn't want to pull out more supplies. So I'm just going to use an acrylic block, the Stardust ink from Concord and 9th, and I'm going to stamp this out on some scrap cardstock. And then I will use that coordinating die to die cut that out several times. Sorry, I'm a little bit off camera here. I was kind of zoomed in pretty far and wasn't really paying attention to how far I was zoomed in. But as you can see, that is a pretty darn close match to a golden color. Like I said, without having to break out with other supplies or heat emboss. I'm using my Hero Art Scrubber block. I love this thing. I haven't even added more like cleaning solution to that. And I can just scrub it and it comes off clean. It's lovely. So I decorated this out 5 times total. This is stacked 5 times high, including the one that actually has the stamped sentiment on top. And I just glued those with liquid glue just to ensure that I could wiggle them right in place and they would stack on top of one another nicely. And then that is the end of the card. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate you. And until then, we will see you next time. Bye.